If you're new to our channel, welcome. It's always a little surreal sharing these stories, but there's something magical about being part of a community that truly listens, that cherishes experiences as they unfold. And if you stay, I promise you'll find something in here that resonates with your own journey. Growing up, I always paid attention to my mother's advice, even the small, mundane ones that most people ignore, like remembering to take my vitamins every morning. After my father left, it was just the two of us, navigating life together in the quiet rhythm of our household. Those early days were unremarkable in the grand scheme, yet looking back, they were quietly transformative. Helping her with the laundry, I began to notice the subtle differences in our clothing, the textures, the cuts, the way certain fabrics draped in a way mine never did. My jeans and t-shirts felt practical, utilitarian, almost uniform in their predictability, while hers seemed to carry a personality of their own, a soft elegance in every fold and seam that intrigued me more than I could understand at the time. There was a gentleness to her wardrobe, a tactile poetry that I found myself studying in quiet, stolen moments, and I think that's when I first became aware of how profoundly objects, even something as simple as clothing, can reflect and shape identity. Bath time, which I once considered mundane, became another subtle awakening. I would notice her stockings hanging on the shower bar, marveling at their delicate construction, their soft, almost whispering textures, and her explanations about femininity felt like cryptic windows into a world I hadn't yet fully grasped. Questions that seemed simple on the surface, like why runs appeared in some fabrics and not others, evolved into a fascination that quietly nudged me toward self-reflection, toward a curiosity that went beyond the tactile and into the emotional resonance of expression itself. One day, driven by a mixture of curiosity and an unarticulated yearning, I opened her dresser. What I discovered there was more than just clothing. It was an entire lexicon of textures, colors, and subtle scents that seemed to hum with possibility. Everything was supple, delicate, and imbued with the faint, lingering fragrance of her perfume. The very air seemed to shift around these objects as though they carried not only her identity, but an invitation for me to explore aspects of myself that had been quietly dormant. That day, the act of handling these garments was transformative in ways that words struggled to capture. It wasn't just about trying them on, it was about engaging in a silent dialogue with identity, with self-expression, with the subtle artistry of how one presents oneself to the world. After school that afternoon, the apartment felt unusually still, her absence offering me the rare freedom to linger in that private universe I had uncovered. I approached her drawer again, this time more deliberate, attuned to the way each piece was folded, the slight give of elastic fabrics, the understated elegance of her designs. Choosing one piece felt almost ceremonial, a ritual of self-exploration. The process of dressing was both challenging and enlightening. I struggled with the fit and tension of unfamiliar fabrics, yet in that struggle there was discovery, an intimate understanding of how clothing could reshape not just appearance, but perception, how the simplest adjustment could awaken a sense of confidence and curiosity I hadn't yet named. The subtle aroma of perfume, soft, lingering, intimate, added to the sensory experience, and for a moment the apartment felt suspended in time, as though it existed solely to host that experiment in identity, self-reflection, and aesthetic delight. The encounter with my mother that followed was abrupt, startling, and full of unspoken tension. Her presence was immediate, her expression unreadable, and the sudden collision of private exploration with reality was overwhelming. It was not fear alone that gripped me, but a complex blend of emotions, from excitement to apprehension, from embarrassment to a raw, unfiltered curiosity about boundaries, identity, and self-expression. In the quiet aftermath, life returned to its rhythm, but the memory of that day lingered as a catalyst for change. Months passed, and I continued to explore, now with a greater understanding of the delicate balance between private discovery and external reality. I found boxes tucked away in the garage, remnants of seasons past, each filled with more evidence of aesthetic possibility. Flowing fabrics, textured garments, accessories that whispered of creativity and individuality. Each item I handled was a lesson in patience, in subtlety, in the art of self-expression. The act of dressing became meditative, a way to practice presence, to attune to textures, colors, and the quiet joy that comes from inhabiting a space of personal authenticity. It wasn't about rebellion, nor was it about defiance. It was about discovering layers of myself that had always existed, but were only now beginning to emerge, as if the very fabrics themselves had been waiting for me to notice, to experiment, to embrace. Even as I experimented privately, the presence of my mother was a constant guiding in its own way. She noticed the small changes in my demeanor, the slight differences in posture and attentiveness, and our conversations became more layered, more reflective. I learned to articulate my interests, my curiosities, my aspirations for self-expression in ways that felt safe, respectful, and authentic. Over time, the act of sharing became part of the ritual, part of the process of growth and understanding. She encouraged me to observe, to experiment, and most importantly, to reflect. What began as curiosity had become a journey, a nuanced exploration of identity, aesthetics, and self-awareness that extended beyond clothing and into the broader contours of personal growth. This journey also intertwined with other aspects of life: the routines of study, the quiet victories and small achievements, the contemplative moments when the world outside felt distant and yet intensely present in its subtleties. I continued to take my vitamins, a simple act of care, a rhythm that anchored me even as other facets of identity were explored and expanded. Friendships, observations of peers, and the subtle shifts in social dynamics became points of reflection, helping me understand how identity interacts with the external world, how appearance, expression, and perception weave together in the ongoing negotiation of selfhood. It was in this careful interplay of observation, experimentation, and reflection that the narrative of personal growth began to truly unfold. The wardrobe became more than a collection of garments. It became a mirror, a silent guide, a repository of lessons in aesthetics, poise, and self-presentation. Each garment I handled, each combination I experimented with, taught me patience, nuance, and the delicate art of inhabiting oneself fully. Over time, I learned to anticipate the feelings each choice would evoke, how textures and cuts influenced posture, movement, and confidence, and how self-expression could be both private and shared, intimate yet profoundly communal in its resonance. The following months unfolded like a tapestry of quiet self-discovery, each day adding threads of understanding and comfort with the identity I was beginning to fully inhabit. I started to see the wardrobe not just as clothing, but as an extension of self, a language that communicated parts of me that words often failed to reach. Every morning, choosing what to wear became an act of mindfulness, a ritual that allowed me to check in with myself, to acknowledge who I was and who I aspired to be. The textures, colors, and subtle patterns all carried meaning, some evoking nostalgia, some curiosity, others a bold sense of confidence I hadn't yet known I possessed. I experimented with accessories, scarves, earrings, necklaces, not for anyone else's approval, but to feel more complete within myself, to explore how identity can be layered and nuanced, complex yet coherent, visible yet deeply personal. It was exhilarating and grounding at the same time, a paradoxical mix of liberation and attentiveness, each choice reinforcing a narrative of self-respect, self-awareness, and deliberate expression. My relationship with my mother evolved alongside this personal journey, shifting into a space of trust and mutual understanding. She became a sounding board, a guide who never imposed but offered insights with gentle encouragement. We would spend hours together, talking about the aesthetics of clothing, the interplay of colors, the significance of textures, and the subtle power of presentation. It was in these moments that I realized how much of identity is formed through reflection, observation, and the careful selection of outward expression to mirror the internal self. She shared stories of her own experiences, moments of vulnerability and courage, and these narratives created a framework for me to consider my path with empathy and curiosity. There was a quiet joy in seeing her pride, not in what I wore, but in the confidence, self-knowledge, and creativity that flourished from these explorations. Life outside the home began to reflect the shifts I had been cultivating internally. Friendships deepened as I felt more authentic and comfortable in my interactions, no longer constrained by anxiety about perception or conformity. The subtle details I had once obsessed over privately, the fit of a sleeve, the drape of a skirt, the shimmer of a scarf, now played a role in how I presented myself to the world with integrity and intention. I learned to navigate social spaces with a sense of grace and poise, recognizing the interplay between confidence and humility, visibility and discretion. School and professional environments became laboratories for experimenting with identity in socially constructive ways, and each interaction offered lessons in empathy, self-assurance, and the courage to inhabit one's own space fully. Alongside these external adjustments, the internal work continued. Journaling became a daily practice, a space to record observations, feelings, and reflections about the evolving self. I chronicled the sensations of textures, the impact of colors, the confidence gained from mastering small acts of self-presentation. Each entry was a meditation on selfhood, an exercise in translating intangible feelings into language that could be revisited, analyzed, and understood. Over time, patterns emerged. Preferences became clearer, strengths were recognized, and areas for growth identified. The act of reflection itself became a tool for resilience, a way to navigate the inevitable moments of doubt and insecurity that accompany any process of self-discovery. Fashion, once a private fascination, began to intersect with creativity on other levels. I started designing small outfits, mixing textures and patterns to create ensembles that felt uniquely expressive. Each combination was a statement of intention, a dialogue between imagination and reality, a reflection of the subtle intricacies of identity. Crafting these outfits became a form of storytelling, a silent narrative woven from color, fabric, and shape. With each success, I gained not only aesthetic confidence, but a deeper understanding of how personal expression can shape perception, affect mood, and reinforce self-awareness. This exploration, rooted in careful observation and playful experimentation, became a central pillar of my identity, a medium through which I could engage with the world authentically and creatively. Over time, the experiences that began in quiet curiosity transformed into a comprehensive understanding of self. The wardrobe, the textures, the reflective practices, all became symbols of agency, autonomy, and self-respect. I learned to celebrate the nuances of identity without shame or hesitation, to honor the interplay of inner feelings and outward expression, and to embrace the ongoing journey of becoming. My mother's role shifted subtly from guide to companion, celebrating milestones, sharing discoveries, and acknowledging the courage inherent in self-exploration. Together, we navigated this terrain with patience, love, and humor, recognizing that identity is not a destination, but a continuous, evolving process. Eventually, this journey extended beyond personal style into a broader engagement with the world. Confidence cultivated in private spaces translated into public interactions, shaping relationships, career choices, and personal aspirations. I discovered joy in mentoring others, sharing insights about self-expression, creativity, and identity, always emphasizing respect, consent, and authenticity. The lessons learned from the tactile exploration of fabrics and the quiet reflections on selfhood became transferable, enriching not only my own life, but the lives of those around me. There was a profound satisfaction in knowing that authenticity, cultivated patiently and thoughtfully, radiates outward, influencing not just how we are seen, but how we perceive ourselves and our capacity to engage meaningfully with the world. Looking back, the initial moments of curiosity, the quiet fascination with textures, the exploration of colors, the careful attention to detail, were the seeds of a lifelong journey. That journey has been defined not by grandiose gestures, but by the accumulation of small, deliberate acts of self-awareness, creative experimentation, and reflective engagement with identity. Each step has reinforced the principle that personal expression is a dialogue, an evolving narrative, and a form of agency that can empower, delight, and heal. The wardrobe became more than clothing. It became a mirror, a guide, a toolkit for self-discovery, and a source of confidence and joy. It taught patience, attunement, and the courage to explore the boundaries of comfort and convention. Today, inhabiting this identity is not about performance or approval, but about authenticity, self-respect, and the quiet delight in expressing the facets of self that resonate most deeply. Each outfit, each choice, each reflective practice reinforces a story of growth, curiosity, and resilience, a narrative built from patience, introspection, and the joy of inhabiting one's truth. This is the story of transformation, not in the sense of sudden change or dramatic revelation, but in the steady accumulation of understanding, acceptance, and self-expression. It is a journey of love for oneself, for the spaces we inhabit, and for the people who guide and celebrate us along the way. In embracing this process fully, I have learned that identity is not something we are given. It is something we nurture, explore, and continually create. And it is in that ongoing act of creation that the deepest satisfaction and fulfillment are found.